Okay, greetings, welcome, and salutations, everyone, to CryptoNet. Let's kick things off with a quote from Satoshi Nakamoto himself, referring to Bitcoin. Quote, "It might make sense just to get some in case it catches on." End quote. All right, let's hop right into our discussion today on this video. We know that the definition of money, a simple definition, notes that first, it's a unit of measure, second, a store of value, and third, a medium of exchange. Units of measure are pretty simple, so we wouldn't attach a high value to accrue from a new technology offering a feature as a unit of measure. We know that so far, and we've talked about this from some of our other videos, Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies aren't getting a lot of credit for being a store of value. So it's easy to assume that most of the value associated with these currencies today relate to their capabilities for being a medium of exchange. So in this video, we want to talk about how that evaluation is occurring insofar as we have observed it so far. And so to do that, we want to highlight a fantastic article that came out earlier this week from Anthony Pompliano, who is one of the founders for Morgan Creek Investors. He's also the lead on the Off the Chain podcast. So in his article, he talks about using a revenue multiple to evaluate the value of Bitcoin. And in his article, he refers to some information that came out via Dyer Research Company earlier this week too, where they looked at the amount of revenues that Bitcoin mining companies accrued, and then they just simply took the value of the Bitcoin network relative to the estimated revenues accrued to the miners, and they said, okay, that multiple is about 11 times. And so when you do that and you measure that against some other famous networks in the world today, it's quite interesting that Bitcoin sort of is in the middle of the pack. Now, what we did is we added American Express to the evaluation of networks that Anthony Pompliano mentioned in his article. So you'll see that on the screen here. And so sort of at the top of the revenue multiple pile, you have Visa and MasterCard in the sort of mid-teens. And then at the bottom, if we were to rank this in terms of revenue multiple, you'd have other payment networks such as American Express and Western Union at about 1 to 2 times. So the Bitcoin network is sort of in the middle and actually getting more credit from that point of view than even Facebook or Twitter. So very interesting. And what we did is we just added a couple other attributes to the analysis, and we said, you know what? If you look at this, if you were to take the same group and separate it between social networks and payment networks, some interesting insights emerge. First, it looks like payment networks clearly are more valuable than, say, social media networks. We don't have a list of every payment network or every social media network, but this is a pretty good representative example, right? So you've got Facebook valued at roughly $400 billion and Twitter at about $25 billion. But, Visa and MasterCard together are valued at more than Facebook. And so we added a few other metrics. We said, okay, let's look at the number of users in these networks to see if that's really driving the valuation, or are there any insights that we can get from looking at users? And clearly Facebook is one of the biggest networks on the planet at 2.2 billion. And that includes all of Facebook's assets, right? So Facebook, Instagram, etc. Visa and MasterCard, just under a billion users each. But some interesting things emerge here, right? So if you look at relatively new technologies, such as, say, Bitcoin, just coming online in 2009. And then if you look at other networks such as Square, coming online in the same year. If you were to take the market cap of those networks relative to the pretty small number of users that they have today, you can see that either these new companies or this new network based on this new technology, such as Bitcoin, there is a lot of value or market cap per user that we can identify, right? So, as an example, Square's market value relative to its only 7 million users today is about $3,800 per user. And Bitcoin's network value relative to, say, roughly the 30 million wallets that we've identified, that's about $2,100. So a multiple of value per user from the next network, that being American Express or even Facebook, in the hundreds of dollars. So this is quite interesting. I think what this tells us is that, again, going back to our first insight, that payment networks are more valuable than social networks. We also see that among payment networks, user growth creates more value among, say, new technologies versus old technologies. So that's just a long-winded way of saying that for each user, each new person that adopts, say, Bitcoin, it creates more value to the network than, say, one person opening up a new credit card on Visa or MasterCard. Now, part of this is just a law of big numbers, right? So there's just such a small number, relative small number of people using Bitcoin today that each incremental person that joins the network creates a lot more value. So then this begs the question, all right? So we just want to wrap things up. This begs the question on where might adoption come from in the future as it relates to cryptocurrencies. And we think that there's really three forces of adoption, right? It's going to come from public adoption, competition from among corporations, and also competition from among governments. And so just as an example, we think that at least 2 out of 3 of these, there's a lot of momentum behind each of these, right? At least as it relates to 2 out of the 3. So let's start from the public. So by next year, Cisco Systems estimates that there will be more than 5 billion people on the planet with a mobile phone. That's almost 70% of the global population, and they're highlighting this to say that there will be more people with mobile phones than electricity in their homes or running water. And so if you assume that opening up a Bitcoin wallet or having a mobile phone and internet connection is prerequisite for having a Bitcoin wallet, then you can quickly see how adoption can go from, say, 30 million into the billions, and therefore accrue more value to the payment network or to the Bitcoin network. Second, as corporations corporations are looking at the same data that we shared on the last slide and looking at how valuable payment networks are, we can assume that some of the biggest corporations in the world that have networks will look to add payment networks to their portfolios. And you've already seen this amongst, say, the so-called FANG stocks, the Facebooks, Amazons, Apples, Netflix, and Googles, where Apple Pay and Google Pay are already adding payment networks to their infrastructure. And of course, we hesitate to say, to make a comment on governments just because, in an earlier video, we talked about how lack of regulatory clarity has been one of the impediments for adoption among cryptocurrencies. However, the message has been mixed. Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, has been vocal and supportive of the idea of using cryptocurrencies in some fashion in the future. I think it's fair to say that she might be an anomaly amongst the group of governments or regulators. So, this is what we wanted to share with you all today. Please feel free to comment, share, and subscribe, and we will come back to you as we identify other insights in the future. Thank you.